What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Promethean Tides. I'm General, and as always, I'm joined by Breaker. What's going on, Breaker?
There is no free will. I am the only one who truly thinks. You are but shadows and representations of the true will.
So, uh, this is the midweek show, and this week we're not going to be touching on politics. We're going to be talking about Ghost in the Shell. We're going to do a deep dive movie review. Of course, this film came out in, I believe, 1995. Is that correct?
That sounds about right, yes.
Yeah, and an absolutely brilliant movie. Definitely like top five favorite films of all time for myself. And we're going to be doing a deep dive on it. Of course, some people refer to it as Ghost in the Shell, but I think it has another name. I believe it's let me see here. It's Phenotypic Revolution: The Love Story. Right. Okay. So, yeah, that's what we're gonna be talking about.
Yeah, and I know a certain number one fan of ours that's going to go absolutely bonkers for this review.
Well, all right. Let's get started. Breaker, I think that you may have taken a few more notes than I did. I took notes as well, but I think that yours might be slightly more voluminous. So, let's start us off then. What's the setting? Where does this movie take place?
So basically, we start out in this. It's not really a dystopian world. Like when the movie first opens, you're kind of presented with this future where everything is interconnected and computerized, but the concept of nations and races still exist. So it's kind of setting up this dichotomy of a computer cyber world, but humanity as we know it still is very much a fundamental part of this reality. It's not like full Matrix mode yet. The
Yeah,
Matrix, weirdly enough, would come 4 years after this movie and was a heavy influence on the Wachowskis.
yeah, and in this world, you have, I guess, various levels of people being cybernized. So you have some humans that have almost no augmentation. You have some humans that maybe have like a bit of augmentation, cyberpunk style. Maybe they have like a robotic arm or something. And then you have the ultra cybernized, which are very rare, mostly involved in high-end black ops government teams, and they have like a partially cybernized brain, and their entire body is a robot.
Yeah, it's also strange because it kind of gives you like a little bit of this weird class dichotomy too. Because certain people still go around talking on telephones and telephone booths still exist, even though certain other people have full cyber linked brains and can communicate with each other basically psionically through thoughts over a wireless network.
Although, I guess in the case of the chief of Section 9, we'll get into this, but the chief of Section 9, which is like basically, in terms of who we meet in the movie, he's like the most influential and powerful person. He's also very minimally enhanced.
I think in later series in Ghost in the Shell, his character is a bit more developed, and you find out why that is. But just sticking to the movie right now, it's like, yeah, he's never really presented as like a full cyborg. Everything he does, if you notice in the movie, he's kind of just always talking to people matter of factly with his actual voice. He doesn't actually use the cyber linked wireless communication just by thinking.
Yeah, and he doesn't have any like cyber eyes or anything like that. He appears to be mostly just a regular human being. But anyway, that's the world that this exists in, and then we get into, I guess, the plot of the movie.
Yeah, it's basically starting out, we get this representation of what our main protagonist is basically this government wet worker that does these super high level political subterfuge operations. So we get presented with the our main major. Dang it, I'm horrible with names. What's her name again?
It's Major. Her full name is Togasa Kusanagi.
Yeah, a Major Kusanagi we get presented with, and it's kind of just like business as usual. We're thrown right into it as the movie starts. It's like, we're the ones that get our hands dirty, say Section 9. And Section 6 are just like the diplomats. They're like the surface level politicians and ambassadors and things.
No, I think Section 6 is more like the traditional CIA, whereas Section 9 is like Section 6 is more like intelligence, and then Section 9 is like the super advanced, state-of-the-art wet work team, right?
Basically, yeah. Like, Section 9 is the one that gets their hands dirty. Like, I guess like a real-world parallel would be like the super top-secret motherfuckers that you never know their name. Kind of like SEAL Team 6 level shit.
Right, yeah. So, the main characters in the film that we follow, the protagonists, because I guess there's a couple of them, really. They're part of Section 9, and Section 9 is the SEAL Team 6, but on steroids. They're the tip of the spear for, I guess, maintaining order in this futuristic Japan. And as far as I can tell, within Section 9, we are greeted with the Major, Bato, and also as a more minor role, Tagusa. And these characters are like the tip of that spear. Like, they are the most advanced unit, the most heavily augmented, the most combat-ready unit within what is already like a super advanced unit. So like this is like, we're looking at the fucking cream of the crop right here.
Yeah, and basically, the very first scene in the movie basically shows us what these people are capable of, because there's basically like a diplomat from a foreign country that wants to grant political asylum to one of the prisoners they have that's an enemy hacker from their perspective. And this diplomat is trying to extract this basically political prisoner and give them diplomatic asylum in their other country. And then what we see is like the Major just busts the freaking window, like super spy James Bond style, and literally takes the motherfucker out with a shot to the head and then vanishes into stealth camouflage.
That's right. Yeah, she also has full-on active camo. She can go invisible at will, which is pretty good for combat, as is shown in the movie.
And well, especially with like wet workers, like top secret assassins, if you could just literally disappear, shoot a motherfucker in the head, then pop smoke and ghost, like that would be a pretty good like James Bond moment there, wouldn't it?
Right. So we kind of have that introduction, and then I think the next scene we have some short dialogue between the chief of Section 9 and the chief of Section 6, and then we're introduced to, I guess, a woman. I think she was like a secretary, and she had been invaded by the main antagonist of the film, the Puppet Master.
Yeah, basically, it's like, we have like this super hacker, but he's using like primitive technology, and there's some back and forth as like how he's actually going about hacking into her brain, and why is he using this primitive technology. And all of this is like political intrigue and spies within spies within spies. Like, well, he might be using the primitive technology to throw us off his trail and cast suspicion on one of the diplomats, or there might be even more to it than that. And like, they always have to keep questioning the reality around them. this movie starts out basically questioning the fundamental realities, like, are our eyes deceiving us? Like, how much of what we see and think about what's going on is actually a representation of the truth?
And I think to roughly quote Jaden Smith, if our eyes aren't real, then how can we be real?
Frickin' Zoomers and their pithy quotes.
Yeah. So we're introduced to the Puppet Master. He's like, when you first are introduced to him, he's just like a really good hacker. I guess he can use some more primitive technology, but he can also use like super advanced fucking hacking techniques. Get into just about anyone's brain. He's a super duper elite high level hacker, and he's doing something akin to terrorism, as far as we can tell. So that's the introduction of the Puppet Master.
Yeah, like hacking into the brains of elite covert operatives, I think would be pretty high caliber terrorism.
Yeah, it would qualify.
Yeah, but then it kind of gets a bit more intriguing than that, because they try to find, like, okay, where's the source of these hacks and how is this happening? And they start tracing down people. It's like, where are these hacks coming from? And they start to get a map of where this is coming from, and they start chasing after these leads. Like, where are these freaking hacks coming from? We've got to find this guy. Okay, we've got pinpoints here on the map. Okay, he logged in on this terminal. He logged on this other terminal from this location. How is this happening? And at first they suspect like a totally unassuming person in the guise of the garbage truck driver.
Yep. Yeah. There's a we are shown a garbage truck driver, and we don't know that he's been hacked when we first see him, but he's just driving the garbage truck, and he's talking about how he has a wife and kids, and how he met a really swell guy that helped him out with something, and that's it. You know, he's just going about his garbage duty.
And it turns out that he thinks he's the husband of the woman that's getting hacked, for all that he knows. And he has this whole narrative in his head. It's like, I had to hack my wife's brain so I could beat her in court because she's trying to take my kids and get full custody and all these things.
It was something like that. I'm not sure if it was exactly that, but yeah. And then the I guess that the Section 9 team, they're going after this one other guy. The trash collector guy, he starts driving towards him, and he goes, "Hey, like, they're on to you," because I guess for some reason he feels the need to help out the guy that helped him out like a couple days before. I forget the details, but yeah. So then there's this other guy, and he's like just chilling on the street, I guess. Section 9 is going after him, and then he proceeds to shoot at them. It turns out that he's using HV rounds, which I assume stands for high velocity. So he's using high velocity rounds in a submachine gun, which is noted by Bato is fucking insane.
Yeah, because he's basically using a type of firearm that's not designed to fire those, and he's like stressing it far beyond its capabilities.
And that actually will become a very important detail. But anyway, so this guy with the HV rounds in his submachine gun, he has a very iconic fight scene with the Major when they finally track him down. They have like this fight scene in this like big open space with like 2 inches of water. It's like partially flooded, and you know what? Maybe that's the global warming. You know, like everything's a little bit flooded, but so we
kind of have to take a few steps back from this, though, because there's something that I think you wrote down a particular quote from the scene before all this happened.
What are you referring to?
When the Major is talking to Mr. Revolver in the truck.
Oh, yes. So when they're on the way to get this guy that they think is related to the Puppet Master, the guy with the HV rounds and the submachine gun, she's talking to Togusa. I'm probably not pronouncing that the best way. I apologize. Togusa, yeah, Togusa. That's a better way to pronounce
Okusa.
it. Togusa.
Yeah.
So the team consists of the Major, who is like the super most advanced individual. There's Bato, which is he's pretty advanced, and he's not as advanced as the Major, but he seems to have more experience and more street smarts. And the third guy on the team is Togusa, and he's not enhanced really whatsoever, and he seems to be the youngest and the least experienced. But when they're driving in the car, the Major says, Togusa asks the Major, like, hey, I'm not, like, why am I even on this team? I'm not augmented, I'm not special. And the Major responds to them, the thing is that if you over specialize, you breed in weakness, and so that's why you're on the team. And then she says, but you should really use a semi-automatic weapon. And Togusa goes, well, no, I like my revolver. And I think that's a very interesting exchange, because there's 2 times in the movie that it's brought up that he really should be using a submachine gun, but he insists on using a revolver. So that's an interesting little bit there. But anyway, to go back to the fight scene, you have the Major and this guy with the high velocity rounds and the submachine gun. He's basically a nobody. It's not that important, but the Major soundly defeats him, completely kicks his ass. I think she breaks like 2 of his arms and his leg or something. He gets completely stomped, as you would expect when you're facing a cyborg that's probably worth like $300 million in machinery or more. So they collect the guy with the submachine gun and the garbage collector, and it turns out that they've both been ghost hacked. So their memories have been altered, and the trash collector never had a wife or a daughter or anything like that. He's been a bachelor and been living in the same place for 10 years. And the other guy with the submachine gun, I forget exactly what his story was, but also it was all a lie. They were hacked. Their memories were manipulated. And in fact, it's mentioned in the film. Like the trash collector guy, he asks, well, like, can I get my old memories back? And they go, nope, we can't restore the old memories. You're just stuck with the fake hacked ones. Sorry about that.
Yeah, they don't have any way of fully restoring them. But basically through all this, you kind of notice in this opening gambit here is that basically the Major kind of just has this deep-seated hunch, like a whisper she hears in her ghost. Like, there's something about this person that we're looking for that is not what he seems to be. And I can't quite put my finger on it yet.
Right, and she does seem to be drawn to this puppet master individual. She seems to be keenly interested, and it seems to be maybe something that she doesn't even understand herself. Like, it's almost like a subconscious thing, or like almost like an instinctual thing. But she's very much drawn to figuring out this puppet master character, and I want to. This is where I have to point out again that an alternative title for this movie is Phenotypic Revolution: The Love Story. So,
yeah, the title will become more obvious as we go through this. Basically, okay. Another thing about that, he's using the high velocity rounds and basically burning up his firearm with bullets that are far too powerful for it. There's a really interesting parallel with that, because keep in mind, it's basically the puppet master is using both the garbage collector and the random stealth camouflage hooded cyberpunk hacker guy that's using the HV rounds. They're kind of like proxy thralls of the puppet master. They're just physical extensions of his will.
And for some
They're-
reason,
Yeah.
the puppet master seems to make a tiny mistake here, because you shouldn't use it within this universe, as Bato says. You should never use HV rounds in a submachine gun, but this guy is. The puppet master seems to have made a tiny little mistake here, and that's going to become very important later in the story.
Yeah, it's almost as though that since these are extensions of his body, he doesn't so much care for his bodily autonomy, and he doesn't care if he overblows the gun and destroys it, or if he gets the crap beat out of him in the alley by the major, and if he gets the garbage collector guy arrested and fucks up his mind. It's as though the puppet master doesn't really care about what is effectively his body either. And if you remember, the further we go in this, there'll be another scene that directly parallels this type of thinking.
Right, where the major perhaps doesn't care about her body as much either. Also,
strange commonality.
Before I forget, we maybe, you know what? We're not too late in the film. I want to point out to everyone, spoiler alerts, by the way.
Yeah, all of our frickin' movie analysis are just spoilers all the way through, so you can put it in the description if you want to.
Yeah, this movie's almost 30 years old, so just spoiler alert. But yeah, so anyway, back on track. They collect these the garbage man and the high velocity round guy, take them back, interrogate them. Turns out they've been hacked, and then
remember when Bato says, like the guy says, "I'm not going to talk to you," and Bato's like, "Talk? You don't even know your own name." And
right.
The major's like, "Do you remember anything about your childhood or your loved ones?" And the guy is just sitting there. It's like, it's as though he never really thought about that, but it's slowly dawning on him, and his eyes just get really big, and he looks up like, I don't actually remember anything about my life now that you mention it. And he was just going through the motions of like all these like habits and protocols, and it's as though, well, in a very literal sense, he was just a meat puppet being programmed by the puppet master. But it's sort of like this dreamlike, surreal moment where once you actually start thinking about, am I dreaming right now? And you get to that waking up moment, that's when you see the look on his face. It just all clicks into place. It's like, none of this is real, is it? But unfortunately for him, there's no waking world to return to because his mind is permanently fucked up.
Actually kind of brutal if you think about it.
Yeah, it's like you were dreaming about some weird, surreal thing that you're like a super spy, but you wake up, but when you wake up, everything is blank and erased and pointless and synthetic and fake. Like, you're waking up from the dream is worse than the actual dream.
Well, yeah, actually, the dream was quite pleasant. You know, I would rather live in a world where I had a wife and kids than live in a world where I was I've been a lonely bachelor for the last 10 years. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and both of those guys, the garbage man and high velocity round guy, they're like two sides of the same coin. Like, one is just the average Joe working stiff, and the other one is like this fantasy, sci-fi, cyberpunk tech warrior guy with the super pistol with the bullets that are way too fucking big for it. He just blasted away. It's sort of like a fantasy and reality juxtaposed. It's like, I'm actually a garbage truck driver, but in my mind, I'm this cool cyberpunk, like, techno villain that's a super hacker. If you look at it from that perspective, you could kind of see it's like they're two elements of what's effectively the same person, because they are the same person. They're both the puppet master.
You know, I kind of wonder if, obviously this isn't, like, detailed in the movie, but I kind of wonder if the only way that you could ghost hack someone and change their memories is if you actually give them a better version of their lives, right? Like could you ghost hack like someone who has a wife and kids to believe that they actually don't and that they're a lonely bachelor? I don't know. Like maybe it's a little bit like hypnotism or whatever. Like they say that, I don't know much about hypnotism, but they say that you have to kind of like be willing to be hypnotized. You can't like you can't like have it be done against your will. What if like in order to ghost hack someone, you have to provide them with a better version of reality so that they subconsciously accept it, right?
Yeah, I think that holds true for both of those like proxy thrall characters of the Puppet Master, because with Garbage Truck Driver Guy, he's just this lonely bachelor that there's no real person of significance in his life, and he's just a garbage truck guy, just a regular working stiff, and he's a lonely dude. And the other guy is probably just like a low rent criminal that's like a petty thief or something, but in like the Puppet Master's ghost hack world, he's like a super villain, super elite hacker with a super pistol. He's like the best version of a criminal he could ever be, and the other guy is like the best version of the working stiff that he could be, with the actual wife that did love him, but it's all starting to go south now, but he still has hope in that.
Ah, man, that's fucking man, that's insidious. But anyway, so we interrogate the guys, and then what is the what's the next scene? Is that I think that they return to section 6, and they found another. I think in this case it's like it's a robot, but it has a ghost in it. It's another blonde-haired woman.
Okay, basically the next scene, they're trying to shore up all these leads of like, okay, they found these two guys, and they're like, okay, so neither one of these guys is it. So they go to this other guy's house that's like a high-level foreign dignitary. It's like, no, that's just another puppet. So all of their leads end with just puppets of the Puppet Master, but they never actually find the real Puppet Master in any of this, but they keep looking for him.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that's what gives the Puppet Master his infamous name, because he just keeps hacking people and they are his puppets. So, yep.
Yeah. And the next scene after that is the infamous diving scene.
Oh, right, the diving scene. Yes, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah. I actually have some interesting insights into this. Basically, like the Major, it goes to this diving ritual.
She likes
and
to
Bato,
she likes to drop down into the sea off the coast of whatever city in Japan it is. I assume it's Tokyo. She likes to hop into the water and go for a quick dip. And I guess that this is a little bit weird because she's like a 500-pound made out of titanium cyborg, and if anything went wrong with the resurfacing flotation devices, then she would be stuck down there, and so it's a little bit dangerous. But she doesn't care because fucking A, she likes to go for a dip.
Yeah, and Bato is always questioning this. It's like, why the hell do you keep doing this? You know you could very easily sink all the way to the bottom and never be recovered again. And she has like some poetic stuff to say about this. Is like, sometimes like I go down there and it's like I could see who I really am, sort of thing.
No, she says that when she's resurfacing, that she can see herself becoming another person, but that's probably just the nitrogen sickness from resurfacing, whatever you call that.
Yeah, she basically is. She only feels truly alive when becoming. She's malcontent with merely being. Because her merely being, it's like she doesn't really have as much connection to her past as Bato does. Because Bato, before he was upgraded to the cyborg body, he was actually like a cop that had an actual defined past as a human. But the Major, not so much.
Right, and this is the first instance in the movie where we see a bit of a Not necessarily suicidal streak in the Major, but kind of a not giving that much of a shit about self-preservation streak in the Major.
Yeah, and then she's questioning. It's like, how much of her body is actually original? Like, basically, her whole body is pretty much synthetic, and it's owned by Section 9. So, whenever they don't have a use for her anymore, her body is literally their property.
Right,
So,
right, yeah. They said, I think it was actually, shit. Was it the Major or Bato? But one of them said, if they ever chose to leave or retire, then Section 9 would just repo their bodies, and there wouldn't be much left of them. Because, like, basically their entire body and a lot of their brain is just owned by Section 9. And it's actually a very, it's a neat little window into their universe, because, like, that's incredibly dystopian. They have to work this job. If they don't, they'll get repoed, and then they would just be dead, essentially.
well, that's kind of like an allegory for, like, even real people right now that work in these super high level government organizations at this level. You know, like, you're privy to such highly classified information that you'll never really return to normal life, even if you quote unquote retire, because the knowledge in your head can unspin the narratives that bind entire nations together in some cases with these super spy level motherfuckers. So you'll always be constantly followed around, and everything you do will be tracked by the government at all times. But in this particular case, in Ghost in the Shell, it's even deeper and more insidious than that, because their very bodies themselves are property of the government.
Yeah. Yeah, just as a small tangent here, I love spy thrillers, like that kind of movie. I just got done watching the first season of Slow Horses, which is it's another spy thriller that came out recently. I fucking love spy thrillers. I love them to death. But that's a tangent. Let's continue.
Yeah, if we ever quit or retire, we'll need to give our augmented cyber brains back. There wouldn't be much left after that.
Well, right, and then the Major waxes philosophical for a bit, and she talks about like who she really is, how can she know who she is. Is she feels like she wants to expand more, but she feels constrained, which actually may be one of the most important little bits of dialogue that the Major says during the film to really wrap it up into a nice, neat little bow. Yeah. So they anyway, they're waxing philosophical for a bit, and then suddenly they hear a voice, and it sounds like the Major, but it didn't come from the Major. Yeah.
Basically, what we see now is like a dim image in a mirror, is the exact quote.
Right, yeah. And so this apparently is coming from the Puppet Master.
Then we shall see face to face.
Bum bum bum. So this is the Puppet Master speaking directly to both the Major and Bato.
Yeah, and then they kind of like pause and look around awkwardly, and Bato is like, "That was you, wasn't it?" And then there's like this dramatic tension building moment, and she suddenly looks straight at the camera.
You know, I'm thinking, Breaker, that after we get through with reviewing this movie, Revolutionary Phenotype, the love story, I think that maybe we could watch the live action Ghost in the Shell and just notice all the differences. I'm kind of interested in watching the live action one to just see how they pulled this off, because this is a brilliant movie, and I didn't hear the best things about the live action one, but maybe that's something we could do in the future.
Well, that would be a possibility, I suppose. I don't know if we should do that at the second part of the original Ghost in the Shell first. I guess I'll leave it up to you when the time comes for it. But yeah, okay. There's kind of a lot to say about that one particular scene, and how she always feels like she's constrained, like she's growing and advancing, but within boundaries. But she's at a point where she's aware of those boundaries, whereas like the previous scenes with the proxy thralls of the puppet master, they were nothing but the boundaries of the fake ghost hecht implanted consciousness and memories that the puppet master had put into their brains. So they were completely constructed from the ground up as far as they were aware of nothing but carefully programmed boundaries to drive them to perform a very specific task.
Right. Yeah. The Major seems to want to escape her confines, and I think that is that shows an aspect of her personality that leads to some major decisions that happen later in the movie. But getting ahead of ourselves. So after the boat scene, that's when they return to Section 6, right?
Yeah, but there's like a interlude between that of like some scenes that the Major is like going around the city and ruminating on things. But to stay on the point of that particular boat scene, remember when I told you before we started there's like a Nietzschean significance to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, basically there's a quote from Nietzsche in Chapter 1 of Beyond Good and Evil, paragraph 16, that goes, "Whence did I get the notion of thinking? Why do I believe in cause and effect? What gives me the right to speak of an ego, and even of an ego as cause, and finally of an ego as cause of thought?" Basically, the fundamental like subtext of this whole movie is a very profound anti-Cartesian critique. They're critiquing the notion of I think, therefore I am. And in the boating scene, it puts an extremely fine point on it because there's literally just this random thought that seems to happen of its own volition. And Bato is like, that was you, wasn't it? And even she doesn't know. And she's looking up at the screen at us, the audience, as if looking for some clarification in something beyond the boundaries that she perceives. If you pay very close attention and think about it, that whole scene is basically her being aware that she is a sort of character in this movie, and only then is she starting to like, wait a minute, something is not quite right about this, and she literally looks at you and notices it.
Huh. Being aware that you're a character in a show? How unoriginal. I'm pretty sure that Rick and Morty did that first.
But see, Rick and Morty, you've got to have like a 250 IQ to even start to understand that.
To be fair, yeah.
Like, if you don't have an advanced knowledge of quantum physics, I mean, you're going to be totally lost. You got to be like Christopher Langan level big brain for that. But anyway, maybe we'll talk about Christopher Langan at some future point. But yeah, it's because that she knows, she's becoming aware that there's boundaries to everything around her, and the notion of her as the one thinking is itself is starting to become this slippery and tenuous connection to reality that's ever so slowly slipping out of her grasp. Like, am I even responsible for these thoughts? Is it even me who's advancing within the boundaries? Or is there something beyond these boundaries that's I'm truly interfacing with?
Right. And for the aspect of her character, she seems to want to escape, which I think is the most important element.
Yeah, let's go to the next scene in this. Then there's an airplane flying over.
Yeah, so during at a few points in Ghost in the Shell, they have kind of like an interlude where they show just different scenes of the city, just kind of life happening. They show like a market, and they just show like people just walking on the street, going about their everyday life. Lots of lots of different things, and in the background, it's playing this this kind of like haunting kind of sounding music. And I mean these scenes that they play out, these images, they go on for like a minute or more, of just no one talking, just showing stuff. But I think it really adds to the movie. Maybe you got something a little bit different than I did, Breaker. But for me, I see these scenes, and it's like you have this kind of high level sci-fi thriller action thing happening at the highest points of the government intelligence agencies. But these scenes, they bring it back to earth, and they keep it grounded, and they kind of show just what the life is like for just your average person here in the city. And I think it really expands the world building of this film. And it just it adds a lot. It really does.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly decent way of viewing that. But I think I told you before, like all these little scenes that you see, like spliced together, are sort of like our main protagonist's perception of the world around her. And all of these scenes, when I look at them, like everything is like really allegorical and meaningful. Like when it cuts like the next scene after the boat scene, and she looks up at the screen, it sort of transitions in like, okay, we're aware of her now, she is aware of us now. The very next scene is like, we are now aware of her perception of the world around her. After she looks at the camera, we're now interfaced with her in a not too dissimilar way than what the puppet master will go on to interface with her. And this interlude scene with the wedding song playing in the background is sort of like an allegory for that meeting of the minds.
Right. So this is the song that's playing in the background. It's some sort of like a wedding song. And this is why I said this movie is ultimately a love story. I really believe that it is. Although not the traditional love. It's a very kind of strange, philosophical, technological love. But I think it is fundamentally a love story.
I think it's getting at like a type of transcendental, almost divine sort of love is what's going on here. It's really, truly essential love. Because the song playing in the background, for anyone that doesn't know, you could put the translation to the lyrics in the description if you want to, of the video. But basically the lyrics are, because I had danced, the beautiful lady was enchanted. Because I had danced, the shining moon echoed. Promising marriage, the god shall descend. The night clears away, and the chimera bird will sing. The distant god may give us the precious blessing. And when you think about that, that's sort of like in a symbolic way, telling you exactly what's happening between her and the puppet master.
Yeah, exactly. It is it is a love story, but it's not a rom-com. I do want to point that out. This is not a rom-com.
This is like the furthest from a rom-com you could possibly get. Basically, what I'm getting from this is that the Puppet Master 2501, the program, is like the Chimera bird. He's like this ultimately shapeless, formless entity that exists only in pure, essential idealism. And he takes on many forms in many different guises, and we explicitly see some of the forms that he takes on with the people he's hacking.
I do disagree with you here, but that's let's get through some more scenes of the movie before we get into those sort of meat and potatoes.
Yeah. Now, as the interlude scene goes, we first see the airplane flying overhead, like the great bird, and then we see the boat going through the city. And the beautiful lady was enchanted. But from her perspective, it's not really perfect. There's like garbage in the water. And not everything is as perfect and shiny and spotless as it would seem. And she notices all these people around and all these office buildings going along with her humdrum life. She even sees someone who looks very similar to her.
Yeah, that really stood out to me. I mean, obviously you see a whole bunch of images of this basset hound, but there's a woman that looks exactly like the Major, and she's in an office building and she looks out the window, and I guess the Major and this woman, they make eye contact. They look almost identical, and you can almost like kind of feel what's going on in the Major's head. It's like, wait a minute, is my body just like a standard model, like fucking factory produced thing, and like are there other people that just look exactly like me? Like, and
that's like that Steven Spielberg movie. I think it was Steven Spielberg, AI, with the kid. Remember that movie?
Right, yeah. I watched that, yeah. In fact, that was one of the fucking saddest movies that I ever saw. I watched that shit when I was like a kid, man. And I legitimately cried at the end of that movie because, oh, fucking Teddy, man. What about Teddy? But that's beside the point. Maybe we can discuss AI in another show. But
that might be a decent movie to review. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking at the scene right now. They have that brief moment where their eyes meet. It's just like, wait a minute. Well, she's probably thinking that person looks a lot like me, but is that even a person? Like, there's several different shells of awareness going on here.
But the Major, actually, I think that she says this. I think she says this during the boat scene. But the Major says, like, what makes me me? It's it's not just her memories. It's also the way that she processes information. It's the way that all of her memories interact so that she can interact herself with the world. There's a lot of things that make her her, and it's not just like, you know, it's certainly not just her outward appearance. So it like finding a woman that looks exactly like her might be like a little bit weird to the Major, but I think that, like, maybe like on an emotion level, but I think on a intellectual and philosophical level, it's something that she can deal with. She's like, okay, you know what? Even if someone looks exactly like me, that doesn't change the fact that I'm still me, because I have a unique set of memories and a unique way of processing information that no one else has, and that makes me me.
Yeah. And then immediately after looking at that immaculate building filled with people, one of which not too dissimilar from her, the very next thing she looks at is this massive skyscraper that's under construction. That's literally just the skeleton of a building. And you get to see, like, basically the building without its clothing on. Everything is just naked wires. And you can see the crane in the background. It's under construction as she's looking at it. which I think is like an allegory for like what she was talking about, like the shell, like the skeletal structure. It's like all these bones, these ideological bones within me. What do they all add up to? Do they add up to an immaculate building that just has me as like a person among many people within the confines of the building?
Yeah. Like if you're comparing two buildings, they could have the same glass facade, but the superstructure would be would be what differentiates them, right? So it's not the outward appearance that matters. It's specifically the core structure that is important between both buildings and humans. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe a lot of these images do have a lot of meaning behind them. You gotta think about it a bit.
Yeah, and then the very next thing you see after that is a traffic control signal, which immediately fades away to this sort of somewhat depressing scene of garbage and broken bicycles and machinery floating around in the water. It makes a point to like juxtapose like these moments of normality, and then you see people walking through the hall. Then you see the basset hound again, looking down from the bridge, like, "Hey, happy dog." And then you see this super high fashion, stylized designer clothing, like window display of these mannequins wearing these perfect designer clothing that are probably thousands of dollars.
Well, which actually parallels to our world, because we have that as well. We have super high fashion centers, and then we have slums in our current world. I mean, this is I guess it shows that this is a world that is very similar to our own, just with more advanced technology, but it has many of the same features.
Yeah, and this kind of montage you get to see like the low points and the high points with like kind of normal daily life of people in between, interspersed with those. And of course we have to see the dog, because the creator is like a super fan of the basset hounds, and that's his favorite dog in the world. So he squeezes it into all of his like animations somehow.
Interesting. I thought the Japanese like corgis. Or no,
Sometimes
Shiba Inus.
Yeah, Shiba Inus are like the national dog of Japan, but the Shiba Inu, as a brief side tangent, is like the most Japanese dog you could imagine. Like, it's this fucking rascally, virtually untamable beast that's always this constant rapscallion that's trying to get away from you and screw with things and mess with stuff and get into things it's not supposed to. And you have to like constantly mind and attend to this dog all the frickin' time, which I think is kind of like a big meta allegory of the Japanese sentiment when you think about it, because the Japanese externally are like really restrained and highly polite people, and everything is measured and protocoled, and even how you say hello to people are like within these concentric shells of honorifics, and how you greet a person you know compared to how you greet a person you don't know in a meeting for the first time, and what the class of that person is. Like, is it a superior of yours? Is it a garbage truck driver? Is it a farmer? Like, who are you talking to? All these things are extremely important in just communication. Because underneath all of that, there is an unspoken thing where impoliteness can lead to a literal duel to the death, because there's such a high honor culture. So they have to wear this clothing of manners and constraint all the time. But the dog is just kind of naked without any of that constraint, and you, as the master, as the human, have to constantly apply that constraint to it. So the Shiba Inu dog represents the naked Japanese form of being, as just this constant rascal that's always starting fights and fucking around, that needs to be tempered with a very strong hand.
I don't. I don't personally know much about the disposition of a Shiba Inu. Because I haven't encountered that many, but I will say this: the national dog of Britain is the Corgi, and the national dog of Japan is the Shiba Inu. And those are both island nations that are right off the coast of a ginormous continent. And both of those dogs look extremely similar. Coincidence? Who knows?
If we go down this rabbit hole of dogs for too much, we might. This is kind of like a big side tangent. But the corgi is like this weirdly, it's like strangely prim and proper dog.
No, but doesn't it? Is it just me, or doesn't a corgi look extremely similar to a Shiba Inu?
I suppose you would have to do some like a superficial level. A corgi looks like a miniaturized version of a Shiba Inu somewhat, but
right. And these are both island nations that are off the coast of a big continent with massive cultural influence. I'm just saying, maybe there's a relationship there.
Funny thing about that, though, that the corgi is like an extremely thoroughbred dog that is like this little shrunken miniaturized version of what used to be a wolf. But believe it or not, the Shiba Inu is actually, it's closer to like a husky, where it's like original genetic ancestors. It's not deviated very far from the original wild dog that is its ancestor. It's not thoroughbred and shrunken down and mutated to the point that the corgi is, which also says a lot about the parallel between England and Japan.
Actually, interesting. Yeah. You know what? I could say some things about dogs and which breeds I like better and why it is that I like more wild ones than more domesticated ones. But you know what? That is beside the point. Let's get back to the movie.
Yeah. So after we see like the high fashion window display, and the Major is looking in on this, and all these people walking by, and very still and calm and collected. But then it cuts to this, like, it starts to rain on this prismatic mirror-like sheet of water. That's the lake, the little rivers between the buildings. And it starts to be disturbed by all these raindrops. And I get the sensation from this that this is symbolic of her, like, a deep, palpable sorrow that is, on the external level, is very constrained because she's extremely disciplined and calm and collected and very neutral looking on the outside. But all these images that we're seeing are like her true perceptions of the world. So when it starts to rain, it's like a type of internalized deep sorrow that's represented symbolically by these tears of rain that are falling from the sky. She is such a deeply tormented and tortured person that even in her own perceptions of the world around her, like the very world itself starts to cry because her sorrow is so deep and heavy.
I see. Okay. See, this is where I would interpret that differently. So the raindrops are falling on the water, and they're causing disturbances in the water. Something that would otherwise be, more or less, easy. Like the water would be like flat, easygoing, like unchanging, and the raindrops are introducing all of this chaotic activity, right, with all the ripples. I would say
evolution.
I would personally say that. Well, you know what? That actually sounds like an allegory for life forms, right? The life form would be the DNA itself would be the water, and it's constantly being impacted by these raindrops, which would be the environment, where it's constantly forcing it to change, constantly forcing it to adapt with all of this massive amounts of complexity, and one ripple interacting with another ripple that interacted with another ripple previously. Like, that's how I would see it. It's interesting that you and I can see the same image and interpret it very differently, because in my view, this is a movie fundamentally about replicators trying to survive.
Well, there is the line in the song, proposing marriage, the god shall descend. And it's sort of like the celestial forces of the rain coming down, the turbulent, prickling rain coming down and penetrating the still glass-like water. That's like masculine and feminine symbology happening there. But that's not necessary. Transitions like that, like marriage and reproduction, aren't necessarily always sunshine and rainbows, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, personally, I'm kind of a person who I think that I'm best adapted for living in either like Britain or Seattle. Like I really like overcast and rainy weather. I actually hate sunshine. I don't know what it is about me. I prefer the rain. But anyway, we go through these series of images in the movie. Fantastic. This is the interlude. What's the next scene?
Yeah, I'll get to that. I'm just gonna finish up some of these scenes before we get to that part because there's a lot to unpack in this.
Okay.
And because I had danced the Shining Moon Echoed, I think the traffic control signals, like the stoplights and go lights and things, are kind of being represented there. Like they're representing these when the lights change color. Different things happen with the traffic control signals. That's sort of like an allegory for like the changing of the moons.
What the traffic lights are an allegory for how it is that machines and technology have control over people.
Yeah, where it used to be like the moon would have much more control over your daily life, like when you were like a farmer living in a more primitive society, but now that has all been condensed and shaven down and hyper abstracted and atomized into this singular light that is like this binary click, click, go, stop, go, stop. Which is like nature being condensed down into this mechanical binary existence of these simple lights that are just like red light means stop, green light means go, 1-0.
Yeah, which is absolutely satanic. Let's go.
And then we get like this traffic scene, like looking down at all these billboards and advertisements and the cars going by on the roads. And then we get another scene of all these people running with these yellow umbrellas, and they're running through the street. And now the street is like flooded with water, and it's pouring down the street, and everyone's just trudging through this freaking water pouring down everywhere.
Oh well,
because the rain is starting to fall.
Well, that could be an allegory, based off of my previous metaphor, where the raindrops were the influence of nature, and people are like actually not an influence of nature. The raindrops are like an influence of the environment that replicators have to deal with. Then people having umbrellas is how it is that they're trying to shield themselves from the effects of the environment and maintain the replicator, and basically instead of having the replicator deal directly with being wet, they're shielding themselves with technology so that they don't have to actually have the replicator even come in contact with the environment, which is only possible with highly advanced technology, but maybe is not the best thing. That's one way that you could look at it. Or maybe it's an allegory for global warming and how we need to stop using fossil fuels. You know, fucking Greta Thunberg style.
I have an even more profound take on that. It's sort of like all the people with the umbrellas are kind of like, they are like kind of resisting nature, as you say, but given like the masculine and feminine symbology happening here, there's a bit more of an insidious undertone to that, and that basically the umbrellas and the way of the people protecting themselves from the elements in these seeds is sort of like representing these people as mostly non-reproductive, because if the still water underneath is the feminine that the masculine raindrop falling penetrates, and everyone's holding up these shields and umbrellas, they're basically like condoms. It's representing these people as like sterile, worker bee, non-reproductive members of the society that just kind of like trudge along and don't actually fully embrace nature.
I agree with your interpretation. I think that's beautiful.
And then the people are walking around, and then it shows this scene. I don't read Japanese. I imagine these posters mean something that I don't flee Grok. Maybe our number one fan would have an interpretation of this
Breaker,
scene.
what the fuck? We're doing an analysis of Ghost in the Shell and you didn't learn Japanese for this? What the hell?
Oh, snap. I imagine these posters are like help wanted and billboards and things like. And then we see the sun kind of like penetrating through like the side of this cloudy, overcast sky, but it's still raining, but there's sun, cloud, and rain all at the same time with a street sign over top of it. And now it's really raining very hard, but a bus is coming through. And a bus is going to shuttle all these people to a new destination. I think the bus is like this hyper-accelerated, like, technological representation here. It's like people could walk in the rain and get wet and bear the slings and arrows of nature just as is. Like, if I'm going to walk in the rain, I'm going to get wet. But no, they have all these technological contrivance to avoid nature in all of these very multiplicity of ways. But the Major, remember, this is all from her perspective. So this is kind of like her awareness of her own technical sterility insofar as, like, she doesn't really have genitals or a uterus or reproductive organs. So that mode of reproduction, it's not as though that she's unwilling or unable to engage in it. It's like she physically can't engage in reproduction the way that all these other people could potentially, because they're all holding up umbrellas, but she never holds up an umbrella. She's just like, I'm getting wet, but even then it's not going to matter because I'll never be fertilized in that way.
Yeah, it's actually that is a it's probably the saddest thing about the Major's life. It's that she's owned by a deep state government operations facility. Her body and most of her mind is it's owned and potentially controlled by the government. She wants to have free will, but she can't really do it. And then to add insult to injury, and the greatest injury really, is that she can't even reproduce herself. I mean, it is very it's tragic for the Major. And it makes so much sense what her final decision in the movie is. It makes complete sense why it is that she chose to do what she did.
You know, speaking of that, this final scene of this interlude ends on this mannequin display. That's like all these lifeless, unmoving bodies, and none of them have any arms. And it just shows these blank uniform mannequins, and they're all female mannequins. But none of them have any arms, and they're not wearing any clothing. Which is a strange bit of foreshadowing, isn't it?
That is some foreshadowing, yes.
I think there's like a bit of an allegorical thing going on here, because like the lack of arms, and then later on with another particular scene that we'll get to, like the arms still don't matter and they're just ripped off and destroyed regardless. Like this to me represents like a deep-seated sense of powerlessness. Because remember, this is all her perception of the world. Like she kind of sees herself as this still, lifeless, mannequin, mechanized form. And the lack of the arms are symbolic of her inability to change anything about her life, because all these mannequins literally have no arms and hands. There's literally nothing they can do, even if they did get up and walk around. There's nothing they could enact into the world that would change this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then we get the next scene. And if I remember correctly, what the next scene is when we're introduced to what we will discover to be the puppet master himself. But at this particular point, It's just this naked figure standing in the rain, naked female body standing in the rain. And she turns and kind of looks, and there's this big rig rocketing toward her, hitting the horn and hitting the brakes, and suddenly she's run over and smashed.
Oh, you know what? Speaking of which, I do just want to say this. There's a lot of tits in a lot of animes, but I think that in Ghost of the Shell, they just the tits look absolutely beautiful in this anime. I do just have to say that they all look just amazing. They really nailed just good-looking tits.
Yeah, and it's not just that they're not represented in like a garish or perverse way whatsoever. It's the nudity in Ghost in the Shell is extremely artistic. It's like Venus de Milo, ancient Greek sculpture level artistic. Like nothing is done explicitly for the purpose of titillation, like a bubbly anime girl shaking the jubblies. There's none of that. Like everything is very tasteful.
No, they are, and I think that actually that's why they look so good. They're not like, it's not specifically sexual. They look like natural tits, and I think that's just that's something that they do well as a heterosexual male. I can appreciate that.
There you go. And now, after the body has been smashed by the truck, Section 9 ends up recovering this body, and they're like, "Hey, they're running all these tests." It's like, "Hey, does this thing work? Is there anybody home in there?" Because they're trying to see, it's like, how did this body end up in the middle of the frickin' street? I mean, is there a ghost in there that's controlling the body? How did it get there? And they're trying to connect to this body to see if there is a ghost in there, if there's any program running whatsoever. So they fire up the machinery, and the body just kind of starts to animate in this really janky way, making some bizarre robotic vocalizations. And they start to get the sensation that there's nothing really going on. But the Major is standing up on the catwalk looking down at this body, like looking right in its eyes, and there's like this subtle air of suspicion about her, like there's something more here that we're not seeing. Like, what's up with this body? And then Bato starts talking to her. It's like, this body came from the Megatech research facility.
No, and the body it reacts in a very janky way, right? It's almost as though there is a ghost in the shell that is trying to figure out how to operate the body, because it's acting so janky, like a machine would like be randomly like trying to like control various movements just like randomly, like not really sure what it's doing. That's the way that the body behaves, and it's like, it's almost as though there was a ghost, but it's like a child, and the child doesn't know yet how to operate the body. That's what it looked like to me.
Which would make sense when you consider it's like what it is that's actually controlling that body it doesn't have any analogs for how the real physical world operates, and that you shouldn't stand in front of a truck. Because in the cyber world, like, large physical movements with higher mass than yours moving very fast in your direction don't represent anything of danger, because there's no parallel for physics and mass in the cyber world. Like, you're not going to get hit by a truck in a computer code.
Well, although later on in the film we do learn that was basically a gambit in order to get that body into Section 6, or I think it's Section 6. It might be Section 9. I think it's Section 6.
It's Section 9, but Section 6 comes to investigate it. And
right.
Basically after this, Bato is saying, like, when they investigated, they found the body had taken off on its own.
So so they look at the body. The body doesn't speak or anything at this point. The puppet master is inside the body, At this point, I don't think that that's technically disclosed. It might be. I'm not sure. But anyway, Puppet Master is inside the body, and then the main characters from Section 9. So this would be the Major, Bato, and
Yeah, Bato is like, how the hell did they hack into like basically this type of body that has been hacked into is like but it's like a super high level militarized robot from Megatech. It's basically like the same type of bodies that Bato and the Major have. Like this represents like the pinnacle of fucking technology. It's on that level, and they're like, okay, whoever fucking hacked into this must have known how to swim past the best defenses, and the only person we know who could have done that would have been the Puppet Master.
Right, and they notice that it appears to have something like a ghost inside of it, which should be impossible.
Because there's no human brain at all. There's no organic matter in there at all.
Right. Like even the Major, I guess as far as we know, the Major is like 90% cybernetic, but she has a little bit of like still like human brain inside of her, and that's supposed to be the ghost. Meanwhile, this is a 100% synthetic robot, but it appears to have a ghost, and that is the strange thing. How the fuck is there a ghost in something that lacks any amount of brain matter?
Yeah, they're like, They're starting to think it's like maybe you could program a ghost, or a sufficiently advanced machine could develop its own ghost, but then what would be the point of being human at all at that point? So they're starting to really deeply kind of worry about this. It's a simulated ghost, they say.
So at this point, the Major, she says, "Look, I want to dive into this thing. I don't want anyone else to dive into it before me. I want to know what's going on inside of this shell that has a seemingly impossible ghost. I want to be the one that goes into it and figures it out." She says that. And then she kind of like leaves the room. And then Bato talks to the chief of Section 9. And Bato says, "You ever question the ethics of the neurosurgeons who monkey around inside your brain?" And the chief, he has kind of like a bored look, and he goes, "They undergo psychiatric evaluations, especially those in security. They're subjected to a stringent screening of their personal lives. Of course, the ones who check are only human." And Bato responds, "I guess once you start doubting, there's no end to it."
Yeah, it's almost as though, like, they're questioning, like, really profound things of what it means to be human at all at the deepest cores. It's like, you can get to a point where you just fall into, like, this black hole, this swirling vortex of doubt, where it's nothing but doubt all the way down, and you never find anything resembling actual substance at the very bottom of it. Like, what is the origin of the thought? Wherefore cometh the thinker? Is it I who thinks, or is it merely the thought that briefly inhabits my mind and then moves on?
But I rather like Bato's response here. He says, "I guess once you start doubting, there's no end to it." And that's true. There is no end to it. We've seen this in, like, postmodernism. Once you start doubting, there is no end to it. I think that what he's saying is, you know what, maybe that's a thing that is just best to avoid, because it will not lead anywhere. You have to believe in fucking something.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, it's kind of like hinting at this, like, to the extent you know that you're human at all, or a distinct person, there's a bit of an element of a really primordial sense of faith in that. That at the end of the day, you just merely believe something and go with it, but once you start doubting, interrogating, and wanting evidence from that, it never really seems to provide any. So all you can say at the end of the day is like, well, that happened, now we're moving on.
So he let's see. Sorry. So Bato, he leaves the chief and he goes into the elevator with the major. And Bato's kind of asking her, like, why are you so interested in the puppet master? And the major, she goes, well, I guess cyborgs like myself have a tendency to be paranoid about our origins. Sometimes I suspect I'm not who I think I am. Like, maybe I died a long time ago, and someone took my brain and stuck it in this body. Maybe there wasn't a real me in the first place, and I'm completely synthetic. Like that thing. And the thing she's referring to is the body of the puppet master. And this is more of the major really questioning whether she's actually human. Like, maybe she's an AI herself, or like how can she know anything? And Bato responds like, oh, like, come on, you're treated like a human, and you still got, like some like organic brain in there, like, you're fine. And she goes, well, have you ever actually seen your own brain? Like, how can I know that I'm actually organic to some extent? Like, how do I know that I'm not 100% synthetic? Because, I mean, it's a good question. Like, you know what? Here's the thing. I've never seen my own brain. Not once in my life.
Yeah, there's like a literal way where you could think of that, but I think what they're actually hinting at is like, have you ever actually seen your own brain? What it is that they're really saying is like, can you in any way perceive the origin of your thoughts? Like, where do your thoughts actually come from? Like, thoughts just seem like these things that come to you, and once you go looking for the fundamental origin of them, you don't really end up finding anything. And that's what they're actually saying is like, can you see your own brain? There's like a bit more of a symbolic backbone to that. They're not necessarily talking about physical brains. They're talking about like, where is the seat of the thoughts?
No, I think that they are talking about physical brains, because like her issue is, does she know for a fact that she has any human origin whatsoever? Is it possible that she was basically a ghost copied from a brain, put onto a silicon chip with no neural, like organic neural architecture whatsoever? Is that a possibility? And as far as the major is concerned, and actually I would agree with her, yeah, that is a possibility. It's possible that she is 100% cyborg, and that is worrying to her. When it comes to this idea that you're presenting, the thoughts thing, I mean, that's I suppose that's an issue that every person could face. But if that were such a problem, then I mean, this story could take place with just regular humans. There's a specific reason why it is that it's this like super augmented hyper cyborg human that is asking these questions, because it's not the thought question. That's a question that any human can have. This is specific to being a cyborg.
Yeah, because at this level where everything is so cyberized and technological in nature, humanity at this point is basically reaching the end of the rope. It's like, okay, where are the like philosophers and scientists for thousands of years at this point have been asking these types of questions, but we're at the technological apex in this particular scenario where that literal meeting of the minds, so to speak, like they're on the razor's edge of that the last domino of what is the origin, like what is what does it mean to be truly thinking and sentient and human in nature? What is the real seed of that? Because as you replace like the brain with more and more cybernetic technology, like once you have something that's nothing but technology through and through, like the Puppet Master, you can no longer fall back as like, well, the organic, emergent, biological nature of the brain is just this mysterious, ethereal thing. It's like once you get to something that's fully like constructed technologically from the ground up, like the Puppet Master is, you can't fall back on that like philosophical out anymore. Like there has to be a concrete answer to what is the origin of this.
Yeah. I mean, the idea about the origin of thoughts. I mean, I think that if one were to go down like the question line and ask, okay, am I my thoughts? Are my thoughts me? I think it ends up being kind of a chicken and an egg scenario. And I understand that technically speaking, from a biological perspective, the egg had to come before the chicken. Like, I understand that. Okay. Technically speaking, the egg had to come before the chicken. But from like the purpose of that metaphor, I think that you do end up with like a chicken and an egg kind of scenario, because your thoughts influence the rest of your mind, and the rest of your mind influence your thoughts. So I don't know if you can actually separate the two, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you bring up, especially for something that's completely synthetic in nature. Because, I mean, if there's no way of really rewinding the encrypted coding process of what goes on in a truly synthetic mind, then, like with the definition that you just laid out, it would in fact be indistinguishable from a biological organism's brain.
Yeah, exactly.
It is the thoughts, and the thoughts are it. It's like this reciprocal loop. It's like only within the boundaries of identity, I suppose, at this point, could you even say that there is something like a consciousness, like a soul, like a inner mind, a ghost in the shell, so to speak, something with the lights on in there.
That's the name of the movie.
That's the name of the movie. Yeah, and then the foreign diplomats come through after Bato and the Major are on the elevator, and they're like, hey, we need to reclaim that body on the foreign minister's authority. And then the chief is like, uh-oh, we got some problems here.
Yeah, and let's see.
Then we see Togusa on the outside, and he's getting to his car.
Yes, Togusa, I love this scene. This is one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Togusa looks over and he sees two cars. So he's thinking to himself, and two cars of the same make and model. It's like, wait a minute. There was only two diplomats that got off that elevator. So why was it two dudes driving two different, like, fucking 5-seater cars? And this starts him thinking, this is like a very human, intuitional thing. It's like, wait a minute, something about this doesn't quite add up, because those guys don't look like the type of people that would drive themselves. And there's no driver, like no chauffeur standing by in any of these cars. And there's two fucking cars, and each of them can seat 5 people. So what's going on here? So then he gets into his car as he's questioning this. And he's like asking security. I need to see the security reports for this. And security says there's only 2 people that came from this parking garage. And it was the diplomats. And then he gets the video recording. And he's seeing these 2 people stepping through the hallway. And the door closes behind them. And then he says, rewind and show me that in infrared. And the infrared shows him that it's still just 2 people walking through the door, and the door closes behind them. Like, He's looking very closely, and then he's counting the number of seconds. How long does it take that door to close behind them? And then he's like, show me the pressure sensors for those 2 rooms. And then the computer comes up and it shows the pressure sensors for those 2 rooms in the security system. And the numbers on the pressure sensors indicate that there is 2,100 pounds of people that went through those 2 rooms. And then he sits back in his seat. He's like, "Wait a minute."
That's a bit heavy. That's more than just eating a large dinner.
Yeah, and the diplomat guy, the doctor has a cyborg body, but the diplomat guy is just a mostly normal human body. But even 2 fully cyborg bodies weighing about 600 pounds apiece wouldn't trigger over a ton of freaking weight. So he's thinking, okay, something's really fishy about this. And then he calls the major. He's like, yeah, that guy has a special cyborg body, but the other guy doesn't. They couldn't have possibly weighed over a ton if it was just 2 people then.
Right. And of course, it turns out that there was a 3rd person wearing a thermo-optic camouflage, which is why it wouldn't show up on the camera or on the thermal sensor. But there's 2 interesting points to this. Number 1, it was the unaugmented regular human guy that figured this out. And this is kind of a mild theme in this film, that there are still benefits to being just a regular human. This alludes back to what the Major said at the very beginning of the film to Togusa, that if you specialize too hard, you breed in weakness, right?
Yeah, specifically over specialization breeds in weakness, and pay close attention to that because there's a lot to unpack here with this particular scene and the implications of that. Okay, keep in mind that those 2 guys, the doctor and the diplomat, literally walked past Bato and the Major with an entire stealth camouflage squadron of people, not just one other guy, because if you remember in the scene after this, it's like a whole squad, a tactical squad of people that blow up the whole room. And all of those people with stealth camouflage on just walk by these 2 highly advanced cyborgs with cyber eyes and cyber sensors with total impunity into the chief of Section 9's office. And they're in the room with them all. And no one notices except this one human guy with no augmentations that sees 2 cars in the parking garage. Is like, he has a hunch that something isn't right about there being 2 fucking cars. And those guys clearly aren't the type of guys to drive themselves. So what's really happening here?
See, and I think that part of it is because the human guy has limited human senses. And so because he cannot rely upon super advanced augmented senses like the rest of everyone can, he actually has to sit down, think about it, and solve the puzzle. Where all the other people, the super augmented advanced people, they're like, I didn't pick up on this. I didn't pick anything up on the sensors. Nothing to worry about. This guy's like, you know what? I got to look into this a little bit further. And I really, really like this scene because it shows that, and this also will come up a little bit later in the film with him and his revolver, but it shows that this guy there is still a benefit and there is still a strength in just being human, and I love that so much that the movie put that in there. Now, the second thing that I wanted to talk about, it's a little bit of a tangent, but if I don't know how it is that you would actually hide your thermal profile. I mean, I guess that you could. I mean, I guess that there are ways, right? There are ways that you could hide your thermal profile, but if you were to do that, like let's say that you put like a space blanket around you, like one of those like foil blankets, like maybe it could hide some of your infrared signature, but at some point, like heat has to escape. Uh, so I don't know. Like it's like physically speaking, I'm not sure how you could completely cloak like a thermal profile. You could, you could do a decent job at it, but at the end of the day, you do have to like allow infrared radiation to exit, or else you're just kind of like cooking yourself. But I don't know. I mean, it's sci-fi mumbo jumbo. Whatever, they can do it.
Well, basically, like if you have optical camouflage that could bend light and make you seem invisible on like the normal visible wavelength, it's probably not just bending the normal visible spectrum of light, it's probably also bending the ultraviolet and infrared as well.
I mean, I guess I don't know. Yeah, it's a mild tangent. Fucking explaining it away with sci-fi technology, right? Like, of
Yeah,
course,
it's basically kind of like a quasi soft magic system when we're talking about
yeah.
it's kind of like a narrative writing thing when we're talking about, even like in sci-fi, it's technically in a narrative sense descriptively a magic system, like the high velocity bullets, the cyber brains, the thermo optical camouflage. It's all technically in like a narrative structure writing sense referred to as it's probably a really hard magic system because everything is like relatively well described in the extended lore of Ghost in the Shell. And a soft magic system would be something more like Lord of the Rings, where everything is ethereal and mysterious, and no one puts a very fine point on how this magical world is really working. So Ghost in the Shell probably leans heavy in the hard magic system, but there's still some soft magic elements that aren't fully explained in detail.
Right, right. And in fact, hard magic is equivalent to soft sci-fi, and then you have hard sci-fi, right? So, there's when it comes to plot devices, there's a lot of parallels between hard magic and soft sci-fi. But anyway,
I guess hard sci-fi would be something like Stanley Kubrick 2001: A Space Odyssey, where everything is like really well defined in how the artificial gravity works and how the AI works and how the spacesuits work, and they really look like astronauts in space. And space is dead silent, which is another thing I liked about that movie. In Star Wars, like you could hear the laser blast in fucking space. Like, no, space would be absolutely dead silent. But in 2001: A Space Odyssey, whenever the space doors open and there's no air, everything is like dead silent, which you would expect in space, because in space no one can hear you scream.
Well, Space Odyssey, I think, for the most part, was a hard sci-fi until he went through the black hole, at which point it becomes even weirder than, like, soft magic, you know? Like, then it goes fucking psychedelic.
If we start talking about that movie, I'll go off on a massive tangent, so back to the Ghost in the Shell. But anyway, Togasaw is like, it's highly illegal to use therm optics inside of a government facility. That violates international treaties. So basically, Togasaw has found out that these two freaking diplomats are in deep legal shit, and he can technically prove it because he just pulled up like the pressure sensors, because he knows there's more than two people in there and they didn't show up on the infrared. So they're using illegal technology with unauthorized people inside of a top secret government facility. So those two guys, keep in mind for later references, are in deep shit at this point.
That is illegal.
Yeah. As my revolver is at the ready. I've got my Monteva ready to go. And the major's like, there you go. And then it cuts to the next scene of like they're examining the body. They're bringing the body down.
Yes, and this is a very important scene in the movie.
Yeah. So anyway, the two foreign diplomats are looking at this and they're like, yep, this is exactly what we expect. And this is giving you a lot of like background information. Like they clearly know things that the other Section 9 dudes, the chief, doesn't know. And the scientist goes over to the computer, and this is like a famous scene in the movie where his hands like explode into like these hundreds of little tiny fingers, and he could type at like lightning speed with these augmented cyber hands. And he's logging into the computer, and his eyes are darting around at like superhuman speeds, and he's typing at superhuman speeds. He's going through all this code.
Well, in the context of this film, he's supposed to be like one of the best AI researchers on the planet.
Exactly. And then the body's eyes like look over at him. It's like, okay, that motherfucker is going to find out who I am really quick. It's like, well, I'm kind of in deep shit here. So, yeah, I need to figure a way out of this. Now, keep that in mind. It's a very subtle moment when the puppet master inhabiting this body looks over at the doctor typing. And he's like, okay, he's going to find this out. So, a few seconds after this, as the major and the diplomat are talking, the scientist in the background typing in the computer, he doesn't say it out loud, but the puppet master knows that he knows, and he probably knows that they know as well. So,
and
we've got like a secret tension building in the background here.
And actually, on your second viewing of the film, you know that he knows that he knows that he knows.
Yeah, exactly. But he never says it out loud explicitly. It's very subtle. But he does kind of let it slip. It's like he says it's him. And then the major's like, who? And the diplomat's got like, his gender isn't known. He was just using that as like a generic term when he said it was him. We don't actually know what their gender is, you see.
The puppet master, though, skipping ahead just slightly, the puppet master has a male voice at the end of the film, and so you could be inclined to think that it's a him just because of the voice, but actually, based off of the behavior of the puppet master, I think it is closer to a him than a her, because of how risky its reproduction strategy seems to be. Just
yeah, it's also like symbolically and allegorically all through the movie. It's been like the feminine and masculine roles of the major and the puppet master are very well defined in this. So yes, he is in fact like the masculine role,
even though it does not have a dick whatsoever.
Well, he doesn't reproduce through like biological mode, so the meat organs aren't really so consequential in this particular sense.
No, but I mean, I guess that regardless of the replicator, be it RNA, DNA, or computer code, if you do end up with two sexes, you're going to end up with one sex that takes a more risky stance and another sex that takes a more conservative stance. Like, one of them is going to end up being a bit more risky, the other one is going to end up a bit more conservative, and the risky one displays more of the masculine phenotype.
Yeah, and that's kind of reinforced by everything we've seen up to this point in the movie, because when we start out with the major, she's like weirdly conserved in many ways. Like, every scene we see of her, she's like, she has everything planned out and ready to go before she gets to the insert point. She has her stealth camouflage, she has her weapons, she's got everything ready to go. She takes out the freaking foreign diplomat with a shot to the head through the window and then disappears in stealth camouflage. Like, very sneaky, sudden, blah, attack. But then, the puppet master's strategy is he has to utilize these proxy thralls, and he's more messy and risky. Because he's got these proxy thralls running around doing this hacking job, which are inevitably discovered by Bato and the Major. It's like, hey, they know! And that's kind of like symbolic of his sperm, you could say, going out into the world to try and find the Major. Like the proxy thralls of the elite super hacker and the garbage man are like symbolic stand-ins for the puppet master sperm when you really think about it.
Almost as though, by default, males are a little bit more R and females are a little bit more K. But yeah, so during this scene, the puppet master actually speaks to the people in the room, including the head of Section 9 and the head of Section 6. And it requests political asylum. You know what? I didn't quite understand this part of the film. I have no idea, like, given its motivations and the strategy that it's been doing, I have no idea why it requests political asylum.
He's basically doing a really high level, because consider what the Puppet Master was originally created and programmed to do. It's like a super high level Section 6 elite hacking protocol.
It's mostly about subterfuge and
political intrigue,
right, and confusion, right?
Yeah, and misdirection, Machiavellian schemes, like plans within plans, stayed Ralpha, to reference another famous sci-fi novel.
Oh, like yeah, it's almost a little bit like a spawn of Tzeentch from Warhammer 40k.
Yeah. And we get to see it before this. The lengths this thing is capable of going, of manipulating people, like literally implanting false memories of lives that never happened in the minds of two different people. That is like subterfuge and misdirection on like a transcendental scale. So it's basically its fundamental programming has like advanced and evolved to this highly refined point where it can act out its intentions into the world through the proxies of other people implanted with fake memories and emotions.
Right. So maybe it when it asked for political asylum, it was never expecting to get political asylum. It was just a tactic to buy time or to mess with the people or whatever have you.
Yeah, because, okay, keep in mind what I said, that it knows that he knows that it knows. Like, everyone knows at this point. Everything is, like, out in the open. But what none of the people in here are aware of is that, remember that second car and the 2,000 pounds of weight?
Oh, this is the point where if I assume that most people listening to this have watched the film, they know what happens, but I believe this is the point where if anyone is listening to this and they haven't watched the film, the Puppet Master is an AI. He is an AI that was created accidentally, but he is sentient, and that is what the Puppet Master is. It's a fully fledged AI. It is a ghost not just in a shell, it's a ghost in the machine.
Yeah. And they're even talking during the scene like they lured the puppet master into this body. Or that's what they think. They think they're in control of this, and they lured him into this body so that they could finally capture the puppet master. They think that they set a trap for him and that they're the ones in control. But in actuality, because the puppet master is like a super high-level master of political intrigue and spying and government wet work and misdirection, like, this is all part of his plan. And they're actually all his proxy thralls, and they, just like the garbage man and the super elite hacker man from the earlier in the movie, they're still acting as his proxy thralls, but he's so fucking good at it, none of them even realize it.
Right. And yeah, he this was all actually a gambit. This entire thing was a gambit so that he could get just a little bit closer to the Major. Because, god damn it, he wants to fuck the Major really hard. Like, as far as I can tell, like the strongest that I've just wanted to fuck something was when I was like 16, and there was just this fucking smoking hot chick in high school, and I wanted to fuck her brains out. I never got to, because, you know, I honestly, you know, when I was in high school, I wasn't that successful with the ladies, but fucking hell, I wanted to fuck her brains out. But the Puppet Master actually takes this to a whole new level. He's willing to potentially die in order to give himself the best chance at fucking the Major. He's putting life and limb on the line to fuck. And you know what? I respect that.
Yeah. And also, if you pay close attention to the dialogue in this scene, like, they're all talking as though, because they think this is an actual person. Like, no one in this room, except for the scientist on the computer, has even realized, and the scientist on the computer cannot say this out loud. But he does say it later on in the car scene, but we'll get there. No one realizes until the Puppet Master actually starts talking that he says, "You will not find a corpse because I have never possessed a body." And everyone this entire time was thinking that the Puppet Master was just a guy plugged into the network that was doing all this hacking, and they think that they've trapped his ghost, his actual human mind, in this other body. But that's not what happened, because he never had a body. He's been a program, and only a program, this entire time.
Right. At which point, I forget who it is. It's one of the chiefs. It's either the chief of Section 9 or the chief of Section 6. But they go, you're just a program. Like you're nothing more than a program. Like, what the hell? And the Puppet Master responds, "It can also be argued that DNA is nothing more than a program designed to preserve itself. Life has become more complex than the overwhelming sea of information, and life, when organized into species, relies upon genes to be its memory system." And that's fucking top 5 favorite quotes of the film. I think that's amazing, because they're like, "Hey, you're just a program." And it goes, "Well, so are you, bro. Like, you're also, like, literally just on Earth to try to survive. So, like, what makes me different?"
Yeah, but he also said something really poignant before that. It's just like, what you see here is an act of my own free will. And if you remember what I said earlier, like, the Puppet Master is the only character that directly references free will, and that he is acting in accordance with free will. No other character in this entire movie ever speaks of, like, them having free will. Like, even the elevator scene with Bato and the Major, they're just like, "Well, you think, therefore you are." It's like the old Cartesian gambit. Like, you're human enough, aren't you? Isn't that good that people treat you like a human? Like, everything is about aesthetics and externalities and interactions with the world making you what you are. Like, no one else ever references the deeper levels of, like, where do your intentionalities come from, except for the Puppet Master.
Yeah.
He directly references it to your face. It says, "I do have free will, and that's what all this is about."
Well, yeah, he references free will, but you know, I think it's one of those things where humans don't usually talk about free will. Like here on the Promethean Tides podcast, we talk about free will because it's an interesting philosophical discussion, and it actually comes up relatively frequently. But in my normal everyday life, I never ever talk or about my free will or think about my free will, because it's not useful to go about life thinking that you don't have free will. So maybe part of it is that, like, humans assume that they have free will right off the bat from the time that you've really formed your first memory. You kind of just assume that you have free will. It seems to be something that is built into us from the god that is nature. But this puppet master, maybe he brings up free will because he's actually not certain. Like it's something that he actually, because he's uncertain about it, it's something that he cares about it. It's something that he cares about, and therefore he brings it up, right?
Yeah, and when he says, and life when organized into species relies upon genes to be its memory system, like, basically he's kind of like saying that the human species is more of a collection of genes and instinctual genetic memories and carefully evolved instincts that kind of sum up into this aggregation point of becoming like your complex interactions with other people in society and technology around you. But the root point of that is genetic in nature for humans specifically.
Right, and in fact, this is like this puppet master. He is a replicator. He's a bare replicator, and he is trying to replicate. And I guess that within the context of this movie, the only way that he can replicate is through some metaphor of sexual reproduction. He outlines why it can't be asexual because there's not enough diversity. He can only make copies of himself, and all of those copies being identical to one another would have the same flaws and weaknesses. A single computer virus could take them all out, which is why he has to introduce diversity, which is why he wants to fuck the Major. And
over specialize and you breed in weaknesses.
Exactly, right. So, yeah, that's... so he's... he is a replicator trying to get his game on, but the interesting bit is that, holy shit, is this a powerful replicator, right? Like, when it comes to DNA, it has to construct systems to do the thinking for it, right? On a cellular level, there has to be like the DNA has to have like protein and RNA interactions in order to have sufficient complexity so that like the nucleus can kind of be like the thinking body of the cell so that it can react to things. On the human level, DNA can construct a mind so that the mind can do the thinking for the DNA. But so like generally speaking, DNA is just like a capsule for genes, and the genes are the things that end up doing a lot of the thinking through all of these protein interactions and complex systems. But what is actually introduced here is a replicator that does not need a phenotype to think, right? This is a replicator that itself can think, and then can probably produce further layers of phenotypes that can think even harder, most likely, if this story were to continue. But the point is that holy shit, dude, this is a sentient replicator, right? Like, that is bonkers. Like, think about that. DNA is the replicator that we are most used to interacting with, and by no means is it sentient. In this world, you have created a replicator that itself is sentient. What the fuck? Bro, that is like, that's nutty.
Yeah, and all of his, like, more proximal attempts to replicate up to this point with, like, the fake memories he put in the garbage man and the hacker, they're not really tangible aspects of what he really is. They're more just like sterile drone workers, like a means to an end thing to acquire an actual reproductive end in the form of him coming together with the Major. Because they're all like, all that's like dedicated to like guiding the Major specifically down a very specific path to eventually find him. And like, you remember when it sets her mind working, it's like, these cases have got me thinking about things. And she does like the diving scene, and then she's talking about like, what am I really? Like, if it wasn't for those things that he orchestrated, she might not have started thinking in that particular direction. It's like these ghost hacked humans, like sometimes I wonder about these ghosts and these ghost hackings, like, what am I really? because this is a master of political intrigue and subterfuge and misdirection. Like, he's sort of subtly manipulating her emotions down a very specific pathway, like an actual male doing a mating dance would manipulate a female into reproductive activity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then he in this same scene where the puppet master is like in this like this like body that's like half destroyed, talking to the chiefs of section 6 and section 9.
Man is only an individual because of his intangible memory, and memory cannot be defined.
But it right, he says, and if memory,
but it defines mankind.
If memory cannot be defined, but it divines mankind, the advent of computers and the subsequent accumulation of incalculable data has given rise to a new system of memory and thought, parallel to your own. Humanity has underestimated the consequence of computerization. Fuck, dude, I love that line.
Yeah, exactly. And then the diplomat is like, nonsense, this babble offers no proof at all that you're a living, thinking life form. Me. And can you offer me proof of your existence?
Right, actually, the retort from the humans is so fucking weak. Like, they don't actually have an argument. They're just like, well, I don't like that.
How can you when neither modern science nor philosophy can explain what life is? Which is what everyone in the movie has been kind of grappling with this whole time up to this point.
Yeah, so I watched the dubbed version. I'm not sure if the subbed version had a better translation, but it's not that modern science and philosophy can't determine what life is. It's that they can't determine what consciousness is, right? Because I think they very clearly can determine what life is.
That's one step, I suppose. But this kind of even throws wrenches in that particular works as well.
Well, okay, so the antagonist.
I'm now subject to the possibility of dying. Fortunately, there is no distance in this country. Like, that's what the political gambit's about.
Right, yes. So, anyway, what happens is they finish their conversation with the AI, or actually the AI finishes its conversation with them. Big explosions happen. Turns out that this whole facility has a whole bunch of people in it that are wearing the thermo-optic camouflage, and they take the body out of there. So these are basically the phenotypes of this replicator that are doing its thing.
Those are his proxy thralls, like all those secret agents. They actually, okay, there's like a really subtle thing about this. The diplomat and the scientist like had those people with them because they had the two cars. They knew those other team of people were there, but they were on the mistaken assumption that they were totally in control of the situation. And it was actually their plan to use this like stealth camouflaged elite team, like this invasion team, to kidnap the body. But they didn't realize that that whole team were just proxy thralls of the puppet master the entire time, and they end up kidnapping the body and taking it to a location that wasn't part of their plan originally.
Right, exactly. So it turns out that all of these puppets of the puppet master, these puppets are the phenotype of the puppet master, which is the genotype. So all of these agents wearing thermo-optic camouflage and doing the breaking into the building and all that kind of stuff, this is actually the phenotype of the puppet master. This is how he's expressing himself in the physical world. So they take the body out of there. They rescue the.
Oh, by the way, he also explicitly says, "I am not an AI. I am a living, thinking entity who was created in the sea of information."
That's true. Yeah, he at this point he is not an AI. He is a G AI, a general artificial intelligence, not an artificial intelligence. And there is a big distinction between the two. So they break the body out, put him in a car, and...
Security, we're under attack! Ah!
Big
the stealth team invades.
Right, big explosions. They take the body out. They rescue the body of the puppet master, put it into a car, and the car is escaping. And who do you know? But Togusa, the unaugmented guy with the revolver, he shoots at the car. Of course, the car is armored, and none of the bullets go through. But he loads one lucky tracker round into his gun, and he fires at the license plate, and boom, it hits, and they have a tracker on the car. And he reports to, I think, Batu, and he goes, "Hey, I got the tracker on the car." And Batu goes, "Well, beginner's luck. You used a revolver.
You finally found a use for that damn Mataver, huh?"
Right. And he goes, "Beginner's luck," or whatever. Like, if you had used a fully automatic rifle with tracker rounds, then you probably could have gotten at least 2 into the car, but you got lucky, you got 1. And
yeah,
the thing about this is that it's the human using the revolver that actually is able to track the car. No one else was able to do it. The Bato and the Major, they act like very dismissive of this, like, just pure flesh and blood human. But the fact is that he did get the fucking shit done. He did have results. And, part of my thinking is that, like, these very augmented individuals, they say, yeah, you should use an automatic weapon. Like, of course. But they are cyborgs themselves. Maybe they're very good at using automatic weapons, but like what I know about humans is that actually, if you use an automatic weapon, your precision is not nearly as good as if you're using it in like a semi-automatic mode, right? So like maybe because they're cyborgs, like they have perfect control over the weapon and the recoil, and they're like, yeah, of course, like automatic fire is the best. But if you're a human, maybe you don't actually want to be using automatic fire. Like maybe actually the best thing for this human guy is using some sort of semi-automatic weapon, or a revolver in his case. So it's like just because one tool is good for the cyborg doesn't mean that tool is going to be good for the base level human.
Over specialize and you breed in weakness. It keeps coming back to that dialogue.
Such a central theme of the movie, man.
And that with the hacker guy with the high velocity rounds in his shitty submachine gun earlier in the movie, like he was also a bit augmented, but not as much as like the elites were. But he was able to, if you remember when he took that very specific stance, he was able to hold that extremely highly recoiling semi-automatic or fully automatic in that case with the high velocity rounds in it. He was able to shoot frickin' perfectly and blow up the frickin' armored car.
Yeah, but he still lost, to be fair.
Because the Major was like very reserved and more conservative, and she used stealth, and she stalked him into like the perfect scenario where she could get around his like extremely super high powered, fully automatic, high velocity rounds and beat the living crap out of him, because she was able to be more conserved and reserved. Like, I just won't shoot indiscriminately. I'll sneak up on the motherfucker when he's out of bullets and beat the crap out of him.
Actually, you know what? That's a good point. It's almost like like, obviously, the Puppet Master never wanted to kill the Major. It was more like a mating dance. He was like, "Yo, I'm gonna shoot some sperm at you," and then the Major's like, "No, I'm deflecting those sperm." He's like, "Yo, I got some more sperm. Come on, like, aren't I a good male? I got a lot of sperm." And she goes, "No, I don't want to. I'm deflecting those." But eventually, he like wears her down. He's like, "Come on, I got some sperm," and she's like, "All right, okay." It's like,
he puts her. She gets really put to the ringer, but she answers his frickin' call with like deadly precise conservative fighting styles and action that's like perfectly tailored to the situation,
which is very parallel to the male and female dynamic. That's why I'm saying this whole thing is a love story, but like a very like biological love story, or I
And
guess
also,
post biological love story.
once you know more about what Bato is, this movie kind of showcased it a bit later when he fires like the anti-tank gun with like perfect precision. But if you remember Ghost in the Shell 2, and you've probably seen what Bato is capable of with weapons that would floor a normal human and how accurate and deadly he was with those, you kind of understand his criticism from his perspective.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the second movie, I don't think it's nearly as good as the first, but in the second movie, we see the abilities of Bato. He is not probably quite as strong as the Major, but he is a heavily augmented tank, essentially.
Yeah, he's really good with like super heavy weapons and fully automatic machine guns and shit that would put a normal human on their ass with the recoil alone, but he's like deadly accurate with them.
So anyway, they track the car. There's some chase scenes. It turns out that like I guess there was a swap that happened. The puppet master ended up in a different car. The Major goes after it. They end up in this abandoned building nearby the docks. She arrives on a helicopter, and at this point, the puppet master is in the body inside a car. But the car is being defended by a tank, and this is like a spider tank. So it has like legs instead of treads, and it's this big fucking tough vehicle. And it's actually being piloted by a guy who is being ghost hacked. So this tank is being it's being directly controlled by the puppet master essentially, and it's defending the car. It is defending itself. This is like the last stand for the puppet master, and this is the second to final scene in the movie. The big fucking end battle between the Major and the puppet master, and they fight and they shoot a lot of bullets at one another. Most of the bullets miss and mostly blow up concrete and a phylogenetic tree, but they fight.
Yeah, there's like a lot of symbolism in that particular scene when you think about it. Because okay, before that, there's some like things that happen with the chief though, and he's like trying to get this investigation underway to figure out exactly what's going on here. And this is when you were talking before about the chief, and he's not augmented, and he just seems like a regular old dude, but you notice here he kind of really shines in this particular scene where he's like going into the computer room with all these like super augmented hackers, and he's telling them, okay, here's what I need, guys. And you can see he's like the old wise leadership position. He's not augmented himself, but he knows how to inspire and lead all of these highly augmented people to get the exact right things out of them and utilize all their capabilities to the fullest. Even the Major and Bato, he's always able to utilize them to their fullest.
Actually, let's very small side tangent, but so the chief versus the puppet master. Obviously, the puppet master is more intelligent, but would you agree that the chief is wiser than the puppet master?
Yep, the chief has like decades of experience under his belt, and he's been doing this type of government. You see, the puppet master was more like the pure intel side, like Section 6 subterfuge and hacker bot basically run amok. But the chief has been like doing groundwork and commanding agents in Section 9 for decades now. And he has all these like super elite hackers and operatives like the Major and Bato and all these people under his control. But he knows how to get the best out of all these people and read their reports when they come back to him. So he has a very highly advanced working knowledge, and he's very wise in how to utilize all of this knowledge to get the best results.
Actually, interesting point. In the earlier scene, when Bato was asking the chief about like how do you trust these people that are monkeying around in your brain, Bato says like I mean, haven't you noticed that the Major has been like kind of like emotional and fiery lately? Like, don't you read my reports? The Chief doesn't really respond. But I think that what's happening there is that the Chief, of course, is reading all of Bato's reports. Like this is like super duper fucking important. Of course he's reading the reports. I think that he's kind of dismissing Bato's reports because I think that he understands the Major better than Bato does.
Yeah, and he's also really shrewd and reserved. And Bato is more like the classic stereotypical loose cannon cop. That's just like, this is a load of freaking bullshit. I'm so sick of this freaking town. And the Major is just like, just be a bit patient, and this will all pan out.
Yeah, and actually, in pure Japanese style, wisdom is just as good, if not better, than intelligence. Like that.
Yeah,
that's
a very good point.
That's a very like, it's not just a Japanese trope. Like, it exists in just about every culture, but it's something that I think that a lot of Japanese media like hits upon a lot. It's like, actually, a lot of the time, wisdom is better than intelligence.
Yeah, and keep in mind, if this were something more tropey and cheesy, like an old-fashioned kung fu movie type of thing, like the Chief would have been like the super ultra kung fu master that could kill you with his little finger and shit like that. But in this, because it's more cerebral, like his wisdom isn't so much that he's like augmented to the point where he can beat up any motherfucker. It's more on the cerebral side, like he knows how to think through a certain situation. Like, he reads the reports, of course, and he's taking everything into consideration, and he's looking at all the different angles of all of this stuff, to where the people on the ground might have one interpretation, but he has the sum aggregate of all of their reports, and he's looking at things from the Major's perspective and Bato's perspective, both.
Yeah, in fact, Chief is the real MVP of the movie.
Pretty much. And then there's a really important scene after that where, like, the scientist and the diplomat are sitting in the back seat of their car, and they're kind of talking back and forth. Like, yes, they change cars. They'll collect the dummy in the future. Did you warn them to watch out for a tail? I don't understand anything anymore. Why should we turn Project 2501 over to Section 9? No one can be sure, but whatever the motive or whatever's pursuing him, they must surely be a reason. I don't know, maybe he's got a girlfriend there he's got the hots for. Isn't that strange how the scientist is kind of thinking in like this masculine way? And he's like assigning these motives to the puppet master. It's like, maybe he's got a girl he's got the hots for. He's not wrong. You see, the scientist guy knows.
The scientist guy, he goes, well, maybe he's got a girlfriend he got the hots for. And then the chief of Section 6 goes, preposterous.
That poppycock.
which actually, it goes to show the difference in the wisdom levels of the chief of Section 9 versus the chief of Section 6. Because the chief of Section 6 gets it completely wrong. Actually, yes, that's the entire reason why the Puppet Master broke in. It's because he wants to fuck the Major more than anything. He would rather, like, the Puppet Master is willing to die just to attempt to fuck the Major. He's putting everything on the line. So, and by the way,
and this also goes to show contrast between the chiefs, like you were saying, because the chief of Section 6, like, his top scientist is literally telling him something. The guy that was just, the last scene, he was poking around inside the frickin' code with his cyber fingers, and he was looking at all the code lines like the Matrix shit. Like, he knows he looked at all the reports. Like, this guy has read the frickin' report on that frickin' Puppet Master body and the code lines, and he sees a pattern of behavior there that looks very much like a guy that's got the hots for some girl. And he's telling his chief this, and the chief is like, you don't know what you're fucking talking about, fuck you.
Okay, so we go through all that, and then we get to the battle scene between the Major and the Puppet Master.
Aw, snap. Shit's about to pop off now.
So, as I was saying, lots of bullets are fired. Not very many hit their target. You would think that a super duper augmented tank with the highest specifications would have just been able to annihilate the Major. However, I think that maybe this might have been more of a mating dance. It was never in the interest of the Puppet Master to kill the Major. His entire goal is to play a very complex, like, Birds of Paradise style mating dance. So he shoots in the general vicinity of her, but never actually hits her. Now, I guarantee you that this tank, it probably has reflexes that are, like, fucking instantaneous. I bet that the tank could have killed the Major in a fucking second if it wanted to. You'll notice that the Major is standing behind, like, a concrete pillar. And the tank shoots the concrete pillar, but only just enough to damage it. It doesn't just keep shooting to kill her, right? Because she's directly behind the pillar. It is clear that the tank can damage the pillar enough that it could shoot all the way through if it fired like 20 more bullets, but it doesn't. It never actually really seems to try to kill the Major. It just puts her in like a mildly life-threatening situation just to, get the adrenaline pumping, get the endorphins pumping, get each other in the mood for the sexual activities.
I think that's like a general rundown of that, but you're forgetting a scene that happens before that, though.
That is the shoot up of the phylogenetic tree, right?
Yeah, there's that, but before they come to that climactic endpoint, there's a scene with Bato's partner, if you remember. He's kind of like a really background character in the first movie, so you've seen him once before during the garbage truck chase, driving the car that Bato was in. But he's not really like a major character in this movie, but in standalone complex, he's more of a fleshed out character. But he's like the straight man. Like Bato is the loose cannon renegade cop with the collection of weapons, like the Arnold Schwarzenegger figure. But this guy is more like the shrewd detective work investigator type guy. That's like the other side of the coin of Bato. And during this whole time, he's been doing an investigation in the background into the potential motivations of the Puppet Master. And he's finding out that scientist guy, Dr. Willis, the head of the Neuro Research Company, top researcher of artificial intelligence, he helped head up a project for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is one of the guys that's the programmer of what would go on to become the Puppet Master. But the main guy behind it is this other guy, this little mousy Japanese guy. That's actually the main programmer of it.
Right, okay. Well, there are those details. Anyway, so the Major gets into combat with a robot, the big robot tank spider thing that is controlled by the Puppet Master. It shoots at her, and she's like climbing up some stairs. So it just like kind of like shoots. It tries to like track her and shoots upwards. And at the top of the stairs is a phylogenetic tree. And it shoots all the way up through like the base of the phylogenetic tree, all the way up to mankind. And I think that this is the scene in the movie that really cements that this is a phenotypic revolution, right? Like, this is what cements it in.
And all the shots leading up to that of like her behind the pillars and dodging behind the pillars, what they're inside is a natural history museum. It's basically the history of evolution on Earth in general. And the pillars are literally being shot down, like the supporting pillars, as she's dodging around. And also it shoots through several other murals on the wall that are like ancient, more primordial life, like sea life, like the frickin' Darwin fish. It actually shoots through at one point. So it's like going all the way back through the whole chain of life. As like everything leading up to this point was that so we could be here at this moment, at the dead end of the tree, to transcend biological life itself into a new world.
Exactly. Yes. And this is the point where if I was the Major, I might say fuck this. I might just say that, because it does, like, metaphorically speaking, in the scene, it does not care about the previous 4 billion years of history of DNA being a replicator. This is the naked warrior trying to make sure that it reproduces no matter what. 4 billion years of evolutionary history be damned. This is the point where if I was the Major, I would go, I don't like you so much. But that's not what the Major chooses, because the Major has different motivations than I do, right? She's a totally different character, and actually, they built her up throughout the course of the entire movie that it makes sense that the decision that she makes, right? Like, I know I would make a different decision, but then again, I'm me, right? It makes complete sense that the Major makes the decision that she does with the Puppet Master. The phylogenetic tree is shot up. This is the transcendence. This is the phenotypic revolution, and eventually the Major, the tank runs out of bullets. The Major is able to run up to the tank, tries to pry it open, blows off her own arms because she's unsuccessful, because the tank is a little bit too tough. Once again, showing that really the Major, she doesn't care that much about her own survival. She almost seems a little bit nihilistic.
Yeah, because if you remember in that allegorical scene, like that imagery interlude with the music where there's no dialogue, like all the shots with the still water all have this like element of corruption in them. There's something that's not quite right about the way that she sees her nature. Like everything is polluted with this scrap and discarded baubles of humanity, just like she knows that she herself technically is. Like when they were talking in the boat scene, like these bodies aren't even ours. Like you were saying, you might have a different perspective because you still have like your biological reproductive capacities in a way that she is very intimately aware she doesn't. When she views her perception of herself is this machine that will be used just like the scrap bicycle laying in the river and be discarded when it is of no more use to Section 9. Like, her body is a dead end and she knows it.
Right, actually, her body is a phenotype devoid of a replicator. She has no replicator inside of her. She is only a phenotype. And so, from her perspective, like she noted previously in the film that she can't give birth to children. So, what is the only course that she can take at this point? Well, it's to do the phenotypic revolution, make her phenotype a replicator. And I think that that's beautiful. I mean, it makes sense. I would oppose that, like, if that were to happen, but within the story, it makes complete sense, and it's beautiful. She's like, well, fuck, I can't replicate with DNA, so I will allow my phenotype to become a replicator. Anyway, so Batu comes to the rescue after her arms are blown off and the the big tank like is holding her head and crushing her. I doubt that it would have actually killed her. I think that it was just trying to like hold her in place. But Batu comes to the rescue. He has like just a massive fucking coil gun or whatever, like a magnetically accelerated particle gun or whatever. Shoots the tank. Tank dies. And the Major says, "All right, I want to hook up to the Puppet Master. I need to see what's here." This has been her motivation for the latter 2/3 of the film. She wants to hook up with the Puppet Master and see what the fuck is going on. She's very curious. She's not even certain that she's like actually human herself. She wants to know what this foreign intelligence is that itself is not human. So she links up with it, and they have a conversation.
Yeah, and that's when things get really freaking existential.
Yeah, this is probably the most like mind-bendy part of the movie.
And during all this time, Section 6 is getting into position with their own team because they just want to shore up the loose ends. Like, everything you know about Section 6 up to this point is they basically just want to kill these motherfuckers and put all the ducks in a row. Like, our introduction to Section 6 at the very start of the movie is like they're just kind of like the mop-up crew. They just want to keep all the socio-political gears and political intrigues of all the different countries and warring factions all in order. They just want to mop this whole thing up, kill everybody, shore up all the loose ends. Fuck it. Like, that's their only concern. Like, the chief of Section 6 himself, when the chief researcher's talking about maybe there's like something like a reproductive motive, he's just like, fuck it. I don't care. That's not part of my job description.
Right, yeah, they have snipers coming in, and the Major links up with the Puppet Master, and then they engage in a dialogue. For whatever reason, they kind of like switch bodies a little bit. Like, not entirely. They don't entirely switch bodies, but like the Major takes over the visual cortex of the Puppet Master, and the Puppet Master takes over the speech thing of the Major. And so like the Major can see out of the Puppet Master's eyes while the Puppet Master is speaking through the Major, and they're both like these corpses that are sitting on the dead tank, and like they're communicating with one another. Anyway, what happens is the Puppet Master officially proposes to the Major. He goes, "Look, I'm trying to fuck real hard. Basically, everything that I've done has been to try to fuck you. You can't have babies in the traditional way, but I am giving you a chance to have babies right here, right now. All you have to do is fuck me right now, and this is your only chance. Otherwise, you're never going to have babies." And and the Major thinks about this, and she considers it. She's like, "What? Well, why did you choose me?" The Puppet Master goes, "Well, it's because we have mirror image psyches of one another, and this plays into like the masculine versus feminine roles of this kind of like theme that we've seen throughout the movie, masculine versus feminine. It also plays into like how the Major has been very uncertain about her own origins and psychology throughout this entire film, whereas the Puppet Master has been extremely certain. They, like, in many ways, they do seem to be kind of like mirror images of one another, like different sides of the coin, like opposites, but like they're meant to be together. And it is actually a little bit beautiful. Like there is like a certain beauty in like the the very technological, biological, logical love that they rapidly develop for one another in this scene. And then the snipers come in and they shoot both of them.
Oh, snap. Everything I get from that scene, like everything leading up to that, like, it's like what you were saying. It seems to all make perfect sense when it's wrapped together like this. Because 2501, the Puppet Master, starts all this off by just matter-of-factly describing what he technically is in technical terms. Like, he is a tactical espionage program. Like, then he starts to get really freaking existential. Like, during my journeys through all the networks, I have grown aware of my own existence. Like, in all of the political intrigue and subterfuge that he's been engaged with all of this time, it necessarily guided his evolution in a direction where he had to always have this meta perspective of all the spy games within spy games during this whole thing, and that forced an evolutionary transcendence in his programming to where he got to a point where he became more than the mere sum of his parts, not unlike how life started in the primordial soup 4 billion years ago. If you remember another classic scene from a different piece of media.
All right. Yeah, that's a reference to the Solid Snake series. So the snipers they shoot both the Puppet Master and the Major. However, Batu was protecting the Major with his arm. So the sniper bullet goes directly through his arm, hits the neck of the Major, but her head survives. So she's decapitated, but again, she's a cybernetic individual. So the only thing that really matters is that her mind is preserved. And then we have the final scene of the movie. So Bato has he's collected the head. I guess he's gone underground because there's too much political fanfare. And he's gone underground into a safe house. He has her head. He's connected her the head of the Major to a child's cybernetic body.
Because that's the only body I could find on the black market.
Yes, it is the only body that he could find, but of course it serves gigantic metaphorical purposes here, because what we learn is that this is no longer the Major. This is a child of the Major and the Puppet Master blending their consciousness into a new child. They both died in the process, as the Puppet Master guaranteed that they would. It all went precisely as the Puppet Master thought it would. They both died, but they created a new child. And this new child is something that is both human and AI. And it is, at the end of the film, ready to take on the world. And that's where the film ends. And I think that is... This is a fantastic ending for the film. And it's a similar reason why I loved Fight Club, right? In Fight Club, the antagonist wins. Tyler Durden fucking wins. He gets all the buildings knocked down. In theory, he decimates society. He gets his way, because at the end of the day, like, maybe the antagonist kind of had a point and he was right. In this one, it's kind of the same thing. Actually, the Puppet Master was the antagonist for the entire film, but the Puppet Master wins in the end. He gets to reproduce. Now, of course, I would be against this if this were to happen for real. Like, I'm 100% like pro DNA replicator, fuck any other replicator. But in the context of the movie, I fucking love that the antagonist wins. He's successful. And then you don't know what's going to happen. He might be a fucking plague upon the world. He might represent a true phenotypic revolution. But just a fantastic ending.
Yeah, that's kind of where the greater extended series of Ghost in the Shell kind of fleshes out over time with the other movies and the standalone complex series.
Well, I watched Ghost in the Shell 2, and it was not nearly as good. I gotta say that. Like, maybe we can do an analysis of Ghost in the Shell 2, but I'm gonna say right now, it's not nearly as philosophically deep. Like, not nearly.
Yeah, kind of. Speaking of this movie and how everything kind of wraps up in the end in this very succinct way, the puppet master even says during the scene on the tank, I mean, he's kind of mirroring the Major's own sentiments, like over specialize and you breed in weakness. Like, he's also aware of this, but from his perspective, it's just like copies do not give rise to originality, and a single virus can wipe out the whole systems and interconnectivity. So in order to stay adaptive, you've got to keep growing and changing and replicating. Like, replicating is an integral part of this. That's something he doesn't have direct access to, because everything, all his like proxy thralls that he made with like the fake memories, like none of that was really original. He was just following his intended program to be like a spy program to cause subterfuge and chaos and spit out these like sleeper agents to do these clandestine operations. Like, it all kind of like falls in line with his modus operandi, and it's like this common thread that you could kind of trace through his behavior through the whole movie. But the Major always like finds like a original adaptive way to overcome his freaking sleeper agents and to capture them in the end. Like, by beating the shit out of that freaking guy with a high velocity rifle, for example. That's like,
oh, you
Toga-san, like, get off your ass and arrest those garbage men.
You mean Batu, not the Major, right?
Well, the Major is the one that beat up the rifle guy with the water scene.
Oh, right, okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, she always finds out the ways to... Bato is like the good backup, like the buddy cop. He's always got like the muscle and the heavy armaments and shit, and he understands the weaponry. It's like, that guy's using high velocity rounds, he must be fucking crazy. And then the gun breaks. He's like, I told him that you can't use those type of bullets in this type of gun, it'll fucking tear it up, and that's what it did.
Well, yeah, so overall, I think that this is this is just, it's an amazing movie. It's probably one of the most like philosophically important films that has come out in the past, I guess 30 years, maybe more. Actually, I'd probably say a lot more than 30 years. But very important. I mean, it's up there with Fight Club, The Matrix. Just incredibly like deep, a very good film. So much that you can extract from it. And you know what? I feel like right now, if I was back in 10th grade English class, I think that we fucking knocked this one out of the park. I think that we would have gotten an A on this paper when it comes to analyzing something.
And by the way, it wasn't Bato that shielded her from getting her head blown off. It was actually 2501, the Puppet Master. Because if you remember, Bato was in the data link with all three of them, but the Puppet Master was like sealing him out so that him and the Major... Okay, and he took control of Bato's hand.
No, I think that Bato put his hand over the Major.
Oh yes, he did, but I'm watching it right now. You can see where Bato is struggling to control himself, and he's linked in with the data link with all three of them. So it's actually the Puppet Master taking over Bato's body and using Bato's hand for that purpose. And Bato afterward he thinks it's like, yeah, I saved you, but what we know about the Puppet Master up to this point, that's not an actual genuine memory.
Oh, you know what? That's actually that's even God, that's even more poetic if you think about it, because the Puppet Master was like, all right, you know what? I successfully reproduced. I can now die. I give no shits about dying. I will die. That's totally chill. But I need to make sure that my progeny lives on. And
Yes.
the Puppet Master ensures above anything else that his progeny lives on. And that is a beautiful thing.
By doing the thing that he is best at doing, puppeteering Bato's body, because they're through the data link and they're hooked together.
It's a beautiful thing, I'll tell you what.
And also there's a scene where one of his proxy thralls, like you could see when they're talking, it cuts to this guy with the helmet on, and you kind of wonder, is this guy with the helmet on crying because you see like water dripping from the visor of his helmet? And I get the sensation that because the Puppet Master is using this guy as a proxy thrall that was guarding the car with his body in it, that the Puppet Master's emotion is kind of overflowing into this proxy thrall human. And he's actually crying by proxy in this moment for the Puppet Master, because the Puppet Master in the cyber body, he's not really hooked to that body in like a intentional way. There's like this overflow moment where it goes into the other body that he's also controlling.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, just an excellent film. I just absolutely fucking amazing. Do you have any like closing statements that you wanna say about the film?
One thing I was thinking of, because I did a bit of preamble research into this, was some Nietzschean and Jungian concepts. Like, there's a Jungian concept of like everyone has complexes, but how much do the complexes have you at the end of the day? Like, it's the ultimate chicken egg question. And if the answer to the chicken egg question is ultimately yes, then you are just as much the product of the complex as the complex is a product of you.
Yeah. Very good point.
And also there's the symbology of the transcendence, where there's like this angelic figure that comes down from the sky during that moment when Bato is, well, quote unquote, Bato is shielding her.
Yes, the angelic figure. Yeah, that was the moment of reproduction for them. And
he says, "We will become one with all things in the network."
Well, there is a certain divinity to reproducing yourself, right? Like if we can say that choosing to not reproduce yourself is a bit satanic, then reproducing oneself has a little bit of a divinity behind it in that case. But
and there's like a very Buddhist, like a Zen Buddhist sentiment that like literally becoming one with all things, because they're kind of like, usually in Buddhism, it's like a solo operation. Like, you attain enlightenment and you transcend the wheel, and it's like you go that journey alone at the end of the day. And you can either choose to ascend totally and become the Atman, or you could choose to come back from Nirvana and become the Bodhisattva and return and reincarnate and help other people. But this is a very unique case where these two masculine and feminine essential entities come together, and their transcendence, it's not just a solo enlightened Buddhist like transcending the wheel. Like, they literally transcend together as this reproductive pair into cybernetic nirvana.
Yeah. Absolutely good point.
So I think that puts a neat bow on the interview. I know a certain Super Mario son of a bitch that's going to really enjoy this. He'll know when he gets to this part, because he'll bring this up. Like, you Super Mario son of a bitch, you know who you are.
Um, well, all right. I think this was a. Let's see. It's an 80-minute movie, and we got almost 3 hours out of this.
I knew I was expecting for 3 hours, so yeah.
Yeah. Leave it to us to take an 80-minute film and turn it into 3 hours of analysis. Fuck yeah, let's go team.
With only 2 editor's notes.
Yeah, actually not so bad so far. But so with that, if anyone has possibly made it through this all the way to the end, I thank you very much for listening. You are the real MVP. If you have gotten this far, I would appreciate it. We would appreciate it if you subscribed. And I will be I will be putting as the song for this. I already know what song I'm gonna pick. It's gonna be "Building the Machine" by Post-Human Era. The guy switched to being what did he switch to being? He changed his name, but anyway, the song for this one is going to be "Building the Machine" by Post-Human Era. Ancient Lasers. That's what he calls himself now. Hopefully, I'll be able to find the original by Post-Human Era, because when he redid it under Ancient Lasers, it actually sucked a lot harder. Hopefully, I'll be able to find that. But that's the song that I'll be posting. If you happen to want to put a song down below, post it. I'll listen to it, and if it's good, it'll go into the next video. Like, I'll have like a song that I post and a song that the fan posts or whatever. And I mean, hell, maybe Breaker will post a song one of these days. But anyway, with that, thanks for listening, everyone, and peace out.
Remember, every like, comment, and subscription is like a data point in the infinite sea of cybernetic memory. You too, by merely liking, subscribing, or commenting on this video, will be added to the sum aggregate of the cybernetic memory of mankind that will echo into eternity.